Hey, family. It's your sister Jocelyn here, and welcome to another episode of Faith on the Journey. If this is your first time tuning in, we welcome you. We are so glad that you are here and want you to know that we're committed to helping you strengthen your faith, heal your heart, and discover a sense of community. And we do so by providing you with a team of Christian counselors who specialize in grief and trauma informed care. We also offer trauma healing groups throughout the year, and we equip churches throughout the country on how to start trauma healing ministries. You can learn about these resources and so much more by visiting our website at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. Now, today we have someone on the show who I had the opportunity to meet in Texas about a month ago, and she has an amazing testimony. Michaela Cox is a multi published Christian author and speaker who writes on a variety of diverse topics, including her journey of having a lifelong disability of legal blindness. And she was divorced at the age of 26 and then lost her beloved husband at the age of 38, leaving her as a single mother. She's here to share her testimony with us today, and we are so glad to have her here. Welcome, Michaela.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here and contribute and offer what I have to share to hopefully empower others on their own journey.
Thank you. Yeah, wow, you have a testimony to share. And particularly I love to start off by hearing about just life growing up when you were a kid, when you realized that you might be a little bit different than some of your classmates.
Way different. There was no hiding or avoiding because I was the girl that always had to be on the front row, so there was no sleeping in class, or none of that. So, because I always had to have, like accommodations, if anyone in your audience's education, IEPs, and all the things that go with trying to do well despite having a limiting disability in the world of academia and school and all those things. So, it was a lot of it was juggling that because while the disability hasn't changed, we all know that with each phase of life comes different challenges, right? So with every school year brought different things to learn, which meant we had to come up with new ways to help me be able to get around all that and learn, do what I need to do for that school year. So it was always changing and evolving, but my disability didn't change. And then unfortunately, some kids can be cruel, so I had a lot of, social issues growing up with, like, bullying and, being picked on and teased and all that crap, so it was interesting.
To say the least. And how did you navigate that? Did that impact your self-esteem? What kinda
Yes,
helped you to get through that difficult time?
it did. I was a Christian at a young age, like 5, so, most people don't remember much before 5, so I can't say that I remember my life before I was a Christian because I was young, but, I was raised in the church, so that was a very always has been and still is a very important part of my journey in all things. It's a cornerstone, and I do I'm not perfect, I don't have all the answers, none of us are, but I do what I can, and I try and hold true to what I believe and let that steady me in all the storms that mentioned in my introduction. But, I had a strong family growing up, and, I was raised to believe that you don't quit, you don't give up, you don't stop, and you do your best, and you do what you gotta do.
That's exactly what you do, and I see that in your whole life story thus far, and it seems like God still has stuff that He's gonna do through you moving forward. But before we get to what you've been able to accomplish over the years, I wanna talk about your journey leading up to this moment because you've gone through many other obstacles outside of navigating living life with a disability. You also, got married and divorced at a fairly young age, and I'm sure that was a difficult season, and so can you talk a little bit about that and the lessons learned?
I didn't grow up in divorce. Like, my parents are just had their 48th wedding anniversary and been together for over 50 years, and my mom's parents were married for 28 years before her father died, before I was born, and my dad's parents, I think, were married for almost 40 years or something like that, and until my generation, no one got divorced. You just didn't do it, and we don't believe in it. Irony, I still don't believe in divorce, but yet I'm divorced, so that was really a hard decision for me because it went against everything that I believed in and to my core values, and it was important to me that, I have a scriptural biblical divorce, and as far as I'm concerned, I did. I don't mind divulging the issues in that marriage if that's what you want to hear, but it's on the TMI side, potentially. So, it's whatever you wanna know. I'm pretty much an open book. But yeah, that was the challenging part, but I learned that I can't drown trying to save someone else, and it takes two. And yes, God does value marriage, but at the same time, He loves us as His children. And if that marriage is no longer protecting you, then He's not going to want you to stay in harm's way. It wasn't abuse. That's not what I'm saying, but there was other harmful things going on. So I'm not, in no way am I saying, I know a lot of people go through that, but I'm not saying that's my story because it wasn't. I don't want to get that impression. So after many attempts of counseling and different things that we tried to do, that it just wasn't. And so it was time for me to move on. And I felt like I left not a second before God released me from it. And then once I had kind of a year to myself between separation and divorce and going through counseling and a program called Divorce Care, I was fortunate enough that to meet my second husband not long after I was divorced, even though I had not been with my first husband for almost a year. So I felt comfortable starting to consider maybe trying a relationship again. And oddly enough, I met him pretty quickly. So it was kind of funny. But and we were together for almost 12 years. By the time he passed away in 2017, almost 6 years ago, in April, between dating and marriage. And so, yeah.
Wow, wow, okay, I gotta back up a little bit because when you went through the divorce and that was painful in and of itself, and you have to work through your healing process with that. Was there some carryover residuals, if you will, that made its way into your second marriage that you realized you had to deal with, from your previous marriage?
Because we dated for 2 years before we got married, we worked that out before we got married, but yeah, it did pop up in the first little bit of our dating relationship because whereas my husband, who also was divorced from his first marriage, he had a lot more time in between the 2 relationships of, like, 6 years, whereas I had only legally been divorced for, like, 3 months and not been with my first husband for almost a year, so it was still a lot more closer and fresher for me, so that did come up in our dating relationship a little bit. He was a very kind and gracious and understanding and was willing to give me the space, you know what I mean? And we worked it out, so by the time we got married after 2 years, I was pretty much over it. So,
That's great. That's good. And I mean, sometimes for those who are listening, you find that things do pop up still, and you
yeah,
just have to be able to work through it and acknowledge it and understand where those things are coming from.
which is why I'm a huge proponent, and I have no shame in counseling. I love counseling.
Go counseling. I'm all about it too. Yes. And so you met your love of your life, and you grew a family together, right? So you had children.
A kid 6 and 3 at the time in 2017 when, my husband, their dad, passed away, and now God help me, I have a middle schooler, 12-year-old. I love her dearly, but we're in that interesting time period, and they're both great kids, and my son's 9, so anyway.
And I'm so sorry about your loss. Losing
Yeah,
a spouse is incredibly difficult.
it's actually harder than the divorce, and I never thought I'd be in the position to compare the 2, and I'm not taking away from divorce experience because that was hard too. I've lived it, I can say, but death of a spouse, oof, ain't got nothing divorce ain't got nothing on that.
Oh my god. And when that happened, how can you describe your grief journey after losing your husband, and how did you navigate that with also trying to care for your children?
It's been challenging. I mean, I'm not saying grief never really ends. Every people say, "Oh, you'll get over it." No, you don't get over it. You get through it. Okay, it doesn't end. It's a constant, and it's always with you. It's it was funny. I was listening to Paul Simon recently. I'm a huge music person, and I was listening to the lyrics of his oh, I forget what it's called. I think it was On the Way to Graceland, and she was talking about the girl that said losing love is like a window through your heart, and like, everyone sees you blown apart because it really is. It's a hole in your heart, and so you feel like you're being blown apart. I was thinking about those lyrics, like, yeah, he had kind of hit that one on the head. But grief is grief, but it's a big difference, and it doesn't make it any worse or any less. It's just different than when you're someone who's going through grief and your kids are growing and out of the house, so you can kind of do what you want as opposed to women who come to grief when they have young kids. I mean, I found out because I was living in New Hampshire at the time on the East Coast at 9 o'clock East Coast time on April the 4th that my husband was dead. And that's within 9 hours later, only getting 4 hours of sleep. I'm surprised I got any sleep at all, but I had to get my daughter ready for school and act like nothing had happened. That was God, not me. So, and you don't get to always delve into your journey when you're a mom with young kids and raising kids because you're busy doing mom life and all the things and you have to be strong for them. So I feel like sometimes when you're on that type of grief journey, it's very different and very challenging as it would be in any circumstances because you don't get the time and the space as much to just do what you need to do for you in the way that you may do it if you were someone who kids are already grown and out of the house. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. So it adds an extra kind of caveat and component to it. And then you're a single mom, so you're carrying everything while you're grieving and then helping kids that might be grieving. So it's just so much, so many things, it's quite the deal.
That makes a lot of sense. That was extremely difficult.
Oh, and let's not forget I'm legally blind raising 2 kids. Well, yeah. So it's a lot of complications on top of everything.
Right? And I also want to dive deep into your children and the fact that they experience grief
Yeah,
too.
that's still a hard hit. I mean, my son's already lived longer than out his father than with his father, and my daughter will be approaching that. Children with grief, it tends to be delayed because of, I guess, their cognitive and mental development and emotional development, depending on what stage they're at. And so even my daughter was older, she was 6 going on 7 that summer. I noticed it didn't hit right at first. I mean, it did a little bit, but then that summer more came into it. She started noticing more things of her grief, and then my son, when he was in 2nd grade, because he was finally 6 and 7, the age that his sister was, so she was able to do it in more immediate than he was. He had a horrible 2nd grade year because we had just come off of COVID and, it had 6 months off, and then his class had to quarantine a couple of times, so he didn't get as much probably in 1st grade, and then in 2nd grade, his grief kinda really finally like, it was even though it had been, I guess, 5 years at that point or close to 5 years, maybe 4. It'd been a while, but because he was finally mentally developed cognitively of the same age and level of his sister when it first happened, because 'cause they're 3 years apart, he was finally able to come into his grief like it had just happened, so that was kind of a rough year for him. So that's what I think they mean by it's delayed, and as kids grow in their abilities and skill sets, you're gonna see waves of it. It's not like one and done. It never ends. That's why I said that. So I don't know if that makes any sense. And so you have to kind of roll with it. And with each challenge that comes up, you kind of have to say, okay, we have this now. How can we help address it? You know what I mean? And then deal with it as it comes. So,
When I lost my father, the grief that I experienced was paralyzing. Even though I worked in the grief counseling field, I still needed the support of a counselor and a faith community to help me navigate my grief journey. Grief is an uninvited guest in all of our lives. Whether we are struggling with the loss of a relationship, our health, a pet, or the death of a loved one, the grief we feel can be extremely painful. In those moments, we must remember that grief is a valid, healthy response to our loss that needs to be expressed, not denied. But finding a safe space to do it is not easy. This is where Faith on the Journey counseling can help. We put together a free grief resource guide that provides several tools to help you process your grief in a healthy way. In addition, we can help connect you to a Christian grief counselor and plug you into a small group that will pray with you, encourage you, and help you get through this difficult time. We know how difficult this grief journey can be, but you don't have to carry the burden alone. Visit faithonthejourney.org/grief to access your free grief resource guide and connect with an incredible Christian community that will support you. Yeah, I mean, what you said is just a good example of how everyone's grief journey is different. Delayed grief
yes.
is very common, and so I appreciate you bringing that up for not just kids but adults, as you described your delayed grief, because essentially you did have to put your feelings and emotions on the shelf and get your children to school the next day and be mom and navigate all these challenges.
I mean, I feel like I act, like, a lot throughout these last 5 or 6 and I still do because my kids are older, and so I could probably do it, but, like, the really hard grief, I kinda protect them from that because they need to know that mom's okay, mom can be here for us, and so I don't really share that with them, and I don't know, maybe clinically I'll be find out that was wrong, but I don't know. You do what you can, and you do the best you can with what you know, what you think is the best for your family, and then hope dear Lord it doesn't blow up in your face. Ask me when they're 18 and 21, and then we'll see how it went. So, it's an experiment.
How real is that? Because there's no blue book to this.
Even in parenting, never parenting, period. Never mind parenting and grief. There is no instruction manual. There is no roadmap. I mean, please, dear Lord, if you find one, send it my way because I'd love it. So you end up having to create your own, and it's just like fake it till you make it, wing it, or I don't know.
I appreciate how real you are about this because that's the truth. Sometimes you are holding on by a thread, and it's a small thread. Now, take a minute to talk about your faith and what God was showing you in this season and what role it played in bringing you through that season of immediate grief that you felt after losing your husband.
It was really hard to say anything at that point, and even in my thoughts. And I remember thinking for the first several, like, 90 days and months, it was like all I could say was, and all I could pray or whatever is, walk before me, walk behind me, and walk all around me, because I can't even think. Like, you literally can't even think. You can't even form a sentence or a thought process because there really is such a thing as grief or widow fog. I mean, you are thinking and you're doing stuff because you're basically on autopilot and you're like numb and like, I don't know, just going through the motions. But to try and decompress and like put into words what you're going through, there are no words. There's just sometimes there are no words. And so it's like all I could get out of my head or out of my mouth or say in my head was, okay, walk before me, walk behind me, walk around me, and I just have to be still. That was all I could do. Like, I was surprised I was breathing, but anyway, because I felt like a huge part of me died the day that my husband's name was John. That John died that night, and I think part of that will always be gone.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And I thank you for being so transparent about this. I think sometimes people mistakenly think that, you grieve first 6 months, first year, even if you do eventually go on and get remarried. If you experience a loving relationship and like you did and you were in that type of bond and relationship and you lose a spouse, that love doesn't die. You continue to experience that grief.
Yeah, and I'm sure most of your audience would know the movie 2004, The Notebook. Nicholas Sparks. We said it all the time. That was our movie, and I was his Allie, and he was my Noah. So, hmm,
I'm
yep.
so sorry. I'm so sorry.
And I don't know what I'm gonna do personally yet. It's very complicated when you have kids, and it's like I don't know how. I haven't figured that part out yet. So, I'm just doing me, doing a lot of work, taking care of my kids. So, what happens
Right.
happens. We'll see. I don't know. Trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're doing a good job. And I think we have to be kind to ourselves. I mean, because honestly, like, the fact that you just haven't just thrown your hands up and said, "Forget it all," that means you're still pressing. And that's something where we can always find the negativity, the things that we could be doing, should be doing, and be hard on ourselves, feel guilty about the fact that we don't wanna get out of bed or feel like, not going to work or whatever, or we might yell at our kids because we're just dealing with our own stuff, and then we all of a sudden now
Yeah.
we feel like we the worst parents in the world. No,
Mhm.
you're grieving, you are
Yeah.
trying your best, and you gotta give yourself some grace, just like our God gives us grace, right?
I think it's funny that you say that because this is what I've really been working on. I've always had like a five-step process that like I learned at an early age because of the disability and what had to keep me going and motivated to do all the things I've done, like graduate from high school, go to college, get that BA, get a master's, raise, all the things. Publish 9 books. Just I can't just do one thing, y'all. I was having another conversation with someone about something totally different, and she's like you said, you got to give yourself some grace, girl. I was like, yeah, I don't really do well at that, but in grief, the last 5 years at the time, I've had to work on giving myself more grace. I'm going, wait a minute, grief and grace. Oh my gosh, I just got an idea. Like the finding grace through grief, and it took the 5 steps that I've always talked about. That's been my system to get me through the disability and the divorce, and it definitely has been my process for the last almost 6 years, and it's going to continue to be my process. It's what I have had to overcome is not what someone else has to overcome, and their struggles aren't my struggles, and vice versa. But the idea of overcoming is the same no matter what you're overcoming. It's muscle memory, it's the same skill set no matter what you do. Overcoming is overcoming is overcoming. So the 5 things that I have talked about, and I'm writing a book that's at the editor's office right now that's going to walk everyone through this process, and then I'm going to have 2 companion books, and I hope to launch a course that's around this process to walk people through their grief, hopefully to the level that I know. Like I said, I don't have the answers and I'll never claim to, but the G stands for grounding, which is finding your grounding in your grief, which is the foundation that's going to hold you. And for me, obviously, that's my faith, my walk with Christ, and all the things that go with that. But I know for other people that can be other things too. That maybe it's your family, maybe it's your friends that hold you steady, in addition to or a combination thereof. And then the R is redesign, daring to redefine and redirect your own course in life because you for whether it's grief or divorce or other circumstances in life, when things change and you thought you were headed in one direction, a lot of times those transitions and changes shatter what you thought you were going to have, and you're left picking up the pieces and you're going, what now, what's next? And so sometimes, because there is no roadmap and there is no instruction manual, you have to be willing and be daring and courageous and brave to say, okay, I get to create my life now. I get to choose. I may not have chosen these circumstances. Like, I didn't choose my disability. I was born that way, y'all. I didn't even breathe yet and I was born that way. Okay, I had no choice in that. And while I chose to walk away from my first marriage, I didn't choose what led up to that. And I never wanted to be divorced. And I dang sure didn't choose to lose my husband or for my children of 3 and 6 to be raised without their father. But I get to choose and I have power over how I choose how I do and what I do with those circumstances and what I choose to create now in my life and follow the path that God wants me to be on. So that's the R of grace. The A is learning to live in abundance. And that could be finances, but I'm not a financial person. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about our mindset and our perspective on life, how we see things, our mindset. There's a reason why in our society we say mind over matter, and that if you put your mind to anything, you can do it. So mindset is the game changer that can be the difference of which direction you're headed in, that keeps you true to the choices that you want to make, that is allowing you to make because you're standing on a foundation. The C of grace is care, choosing clarity and care over chaos and confusion. I feel like all of these could be a whole totally different conversation in themselves that we could really unpack. But the C is talking about self-care, and I think we need to change the a shift on how people see self-care, and that's such a big topic right now. But self-care has been invaluable to me over the last 5 years because I have to take care of myself in order to be the best version I need to be for my kids and to have the best life and thrive in life. The last aspect of it is essentially equip, which is the E, because we need things in life to help us travel well. I mean, I'm getting ready to go to Nashville today, and I'm not walking out of my house without my clothes and knowing where I'm staying in my hotel. You need things for any trip. So that's equally true of the life's journey. You need things to help you travel it well so that you can thrive. So being essentially equipped gives you the resources and tools to get the care you need so that you can have the mindset you need to stay true to the choices that you're making while you're standing on this foundation. I know that's a lot to unpack. And like I said, I feel like this could be 5 conversations, but I hope that makes sense. And those are exactly the things that I've always done because of the disability, more so other ones younger age, because you don't always understand that when you're a kid, or definitely the way I phrased it now. But and through the divorce I did those things, and as I went through grief and still going through grief, I do those things, and that's my process. And I feel like that would work for anybody because like I said, overcoming is overcoming is overcoming no matter what you're overcoming. So those apply universally to a lot of people because that's just what it takes to overcome, in my opinion.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I do think that applies to everyone. And it actually leads me to my next question because for some people, they're dealt certain hands that they might not like in life. You were dealt, like you said, a disability that you had no choice in. And with that being said, some people they might struggle saying, "Well, I can't do XYZ because of whatever their cards were that they were dealt." So, you don't seem like you live your life like that. I mean, writing all these books and doing all these different things.
I'm from Texas. I'm a Southern girl, and I'm a redhead, okay? So, the kinda lives up to the reputation. I don't take no very well. That pretty much assures that I'm going to do it, and I don't know what the more, appropriate version of this expression would be, but I've always liked it. It's kinda like, "Hold my beer and sit back and watch, because let me go, because 'cause I'm gonna do it." So, grape juice, whatever you drink, but coffee, I guess, I don't know. But that's kind of been my attitude in life. I don't know, for better or for worse, but yeah. I mean, I don't drive. There are some things you're never gonna be able to get around medically, but there's ways of doing it if you're willing and you're dedicated and you're determined and you put your mind to it. I take Ubers, I take Lyfts, I'm glad I finally have it in my area, or I get friends, or I pay someone to take me places. There's ways of figuring things out if you're willing to do it, and even though it's harder and it may not be what you want, and I didn't say it was easy. I didn't say it was simple. This is not about easy. This isn't about simple. This isn't about comfort. Although we would prefer that. But you do what you got to do if you want to do it. Anything worth doing is doing right and you get it done, right?
Can I just bottle up that mindset that you have? I think that if we could just market that,
Yeah,
I mean, come
right?
on.
I don't got time for excuses, girl. I ain't got time for none of that. I got too much to do, places to go, things to do. I ain't got time for that. You can take your excuses somewhere else because I ain't got time for them. And I don't do that very well. No, that's not to say that you don't need to take moments. And sometimes, depending on what the issue is, more moments. Like, I'm not saying it's been easy, but I ain't have time to play games, y'all.
So, message to anybody who was counting her out or anyone else who's differently abled is some way I like to call it sometimes because we all have different issues. Yours might
Mhm.
be visible to people or known, but I think that mindset that I can't do something because this is my circumstance. You flipping that all the way upside down. I get it goes back to that old saying, if there's a will, there's a way. You might not be able to
Exactly.
go this way straight, but you can go around the
Yeah.
corner and find something else to
I
get it
can't move the
done.
mountain, but I can make sure go up and around it, people. You hear what I'm saying? That's why I've always said through facing God and his strength and determination and hard work. I'm not bragging, that's not what I'm saying, but I've done things people never thought I should have done or could have been able to do or would have done. So,
And it's glory to God.
yeah.
Yeah. So in the last few minutes we have, and I would love to stay on and talk to you. I might just have to have you back on the show when your book comes out. But for right now, just briefly, just talk about your upcoming project. What's the main takeaway that you want people to walk away with for your upcoming project?
Which one, darling?
I know you have so many. Your upcoming book project, your upcoming book that's about to be released. What's the main takeaway?
The next book that I'm hoping to come out is going to be the second one in the religious series, which is about the ripple effect that we can do to be difference makers and the influence we can have in the world through our choices. But hopefully that'll be in February. I'm really excited about the one that I'll be releasing in June that has to do with finding grace and what I hope to do with the program. But my main takeaway is always that we get one life, we get one shot at this. So choose well and give it your best shot so that you can live the life you want and have your best life and thrive.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want people to know where they can find you. So I'm going to put your website up and if you can share any other channels that they can search for you on.
On that website, you can get to all my things like Twitter and Facebook. I'm probably on Facebook the most, and then all of my books are on Amazon, and I have a author central page for anyone who knows the publishing world of KDP, but it's all on that website. You can see all of it there.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you again for being a guest on the show. So grateful to have you. I'm so glad I met you in Texas at the conference. And let me tell y'all, we're both authors, and so I met her at an author
Uh-huh.
conference. And when she came up to me so bold and was like, "I want to be on your podcast," I'm like, "Well, okay, well, let's do it."
Let's do it.
so
And we
so
got it
I'm
done.
grateful. Yes, I'm grateful. And I look forward to continue to watch you and just see what God does through you, but you've been definitely inspired my audience today, and you've inspired me, so thank you
Okay.
for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor, and I would love to do this again.
Yes, yes, thank you, Michaela. And thank you all for tuning into this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Wow. I'm telling you, there's something special about her. And if you enjoyed today's broadcast, you be sure to leave a 5-star review if you're listening to the podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe and share it with a friend. Let's get this message out to the world. Remind people that all things are possible through Christ and that healing is possible for you and for me. Also, if you're looking for a Christian counselor, feel free to visit our website at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. So that's it for this time. Until we meet again, you stay blessed and you keep your faith on the journey. I'll see you soon, family.